From Korea to Germany. From Alaska to Puerto Rico. All over the world, the United States Army is on the alert to defend our country, you, the American people, against aggression. This is The Big Picture, an official television report to the nation from the United States Army. Now, to show you part of the big picture, here is Sergeant James Mansfield.
Today, The Big Picture is going to take you back in time, about 9 years to June 1944, a day when American combat infantry made history on the beaches of Normandy in France. It was D-Day, and the men of the Blue Badge were bringing the war to the enemy. You will see the buildup that made the invasion possible, and the convoy that brought our army across the channel. But before we take you back to D-Day, Colonel Quen will review for you 5 points to keep in mind when thinking of the combat infantryman. Then later on, he will have an interesting story to tell you about his meeting with Herman Goering, Hitler's air marshal. So now we take you to the office of Colonel William W Quen.
How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? Before we see the invasion of Normandy, I'd like to review with you some of the points that we brought up last week. Some of the points that have to do with the infantryman and his weapon. There are 5 basic points that I'd like to discuss at this time. The first of these points has to do with the rifle itself and the man who carries it. We are theoretically, at least so-called, in a state of push-button warfare with atomic energy and in the atomic age. But the man with a rifle is still the basic instrument of combat. The place where he goes is the place where it has to be gone by men with rifles. It was true in the last war, and it's true in Korea today. No other element has been able to eliminate the enemy except the man with a rifle. The second of these points has to do with the capacity of the man himself and the requirement that he has to know 12 to 15 different weapons, and not only the basic rifle, machine guns, the mortars, recoilless rifles. He has to be a man of some intelligence. Further, that the next point, everything that we have in our defense effort is designed to assist this man in his forward progress wherever he goes. Basically, and the fourth point, there has been no system, no particular device yet created which can take and hold property or real estate except the man with a rifle. And fifth and last, I'd like to ask you, in the event that we were invaded, how the fight would go. Can you picture the type of fight that would be here in the United States? I ask you to visualize whether or not our atomic bombs would drop, our own atomic bombs would drop on Pittsburgh. And I'm sure you'll agree with me that they would not. We would not use our mass weapons of deployment, but we would fight with this rifle in our home towns and in the streets of our city. You know, one of the most interesting meetings that I ever attended had to do with a meeting between General Tui Spatz, my boss, General Patch in the 7th Army, and Reich Marshal Herman Goering, immediately after he was captured by the 7th Army in Bavaria. At this meeting, General Spatz asked the Reich Marshal about various types of air activity, and particularly the battle over Britain. And after a few minutes of discussion, General Spatz said to Herman Goering, I would like to ask you the $64 question. And that question is this: could we have defeated Germany without invasion without the invasion of Normandy? Well, Goring's answer was almost dramatic when he said nein, of course, which is German for no. And General Spaatz said, well, why? Well, Goring went on to explain that the B-25 came as no great surprise to the Germans, but what did come as a surprise was the fact that they had underestimated the American potential to produce and to distribute B-25s in the quantity they did. Goring said that the B-25s disrupted the jet airplane program to a point where they had immediately to go underground. He further went on to say that for every offense in war there is a corresponding or reactive defense, and the Germans, of course, tried to go underground in order to put out their jet aircraft in time to be effective. Well, because they were late in this program, our aircraft delivered many telling blows. But when, according to Goring, when the infantrymen hit the beaches, that then posed a different requirement, one of space instead of time, because they were underground to a degree. And as the infantry moved inland, they had to take men out of their plants, put rifles in their hands to go stop us. Consequently, they were losing both time and space, and eventually space overtook them and moved in, and our men with infantry overtook their plants that had the jet in them, which, of course, Herman said, if we could have gotten our jets in the air in sufficient quantity, why, we would have knocked you out of the air. Well, we'll never know precisely the outcome one way or the other, except by history itself, and of course we do know that it was the man with the rifle that took the beaches and led the spearhead that eventually wound up in victory. So at this time, the blue badge presents the invasion of Normandy.
In December 1943, at terror on Persia, the date for the liberation of the people of Europe was set on the Allied calendar of operations. Chosen to be supreme commander was General Dwight D Eisenhower. Destroy Hitler's empire, smash it by air, break it wide open, then invade by sea. That was the directive. The cross-channel assault was the crux of our plan. Early capture of a large port was of the utmost importance. Considered were Calais, Dieppe, Le Havre, Cherbourg, Brest. Cherbourg was selected. For more than one full year, there poured into Great Britain a torrent of war implements, tanks, guns, weapons beyond description. And men, American soldiers, at the rate of 150,000 every month. Assault training included every phase of the coming battle. In the early spring of 1944, joint maneuvers of the ground, sea, and air forces, which were to make the attack, were held along the southern coast of England. Every duty was performed as if this were the real thing. British shores, chosen for their similarity to the coastlines of the Normandy Peninsula, were the staging areas for these maneuvers. Meanwhile, the Allied strategic air assault on Fortress Europe went on with ever-mounting power. Day and night, the Allied air forces sent their bomb cargoes into the vitals of Hitler's self-proclaimed kingdom. Targets, factories, airdromes, synthetic fuel plants, crude oil refineries, munitions works, railroads, canals, power plants. The climax of the air war came in February 1944, when the Luftwaffe made a desperate all-out effort to sweep our day bombers from the sky. The battle raged for a week. The cost to us was high, but the German Air Force came out of the battle crippled beyond redemption. Our attacks continued with unabated fury. At bivouac and training areas, ground troops received their alert orders. Men and equipment started to move. 65,000 men and 7,600 vehicles from bivouac areas all over Great Britain were moved to marshalling areas in southern England without a hitch. Highways were kept clear of all civilian traffic during this period. Rumor that the great invasion was at last underway flew through the length and breadth of Great Britain. In the marshalling area, each man drew a new gas mask of the latest type, an instantaneous life belt. Field rations were issued, including cigarettes and candy. When the men received French folding money, they knew what was what. Now special briefing officers took over. Each unit was briefed individually. The movement of the initial invasion task force from the marshalling areas to the embarkation points in southeastern England began on 30 May 1944. The timetable called for all troops, vehicles, and supplies to be aboard their transports within 5 days. This transportation and embarkation schedule, so vital to the whole invasion plan, required the closest possible coordination of times of departure and arrival. The operation was executed with expert skill and efficiency. Morale was high. Toughened, skilled, easy under discipline, our men knew they were ready. Embarkation of men and equipment took place simultaneously at 9 seaports along the southern and southwestern coast of England. All vehicles and tanks were loaded backwards on LSTs and LCIs. Concrete and cobblestone embarkation lanes known as hards had been constructed to speed loading. All vehicles embarked with gas tanks filled and sufficient extra gas for 150 miles. And the foot soldier was on time and in place. All English seashore towns through which our military forces passed were quarantined as a precaution against the leakage of information. Had the Luftwaffe commanded the skies at this juncture, it could have inflicted great damage to our men and ships, concentrated as they were in this relatively small area. Each man carried 1 K and 1 D ration. No extra clothing or barracks bags on this trip. General Eisenhower said of these men, "There is no question at all as to the readiness of the troops. They are well trained, fit, and impatient to get the job started and completed." These small assault boats ran a continuous shuttle service from the hards and docks to the transports lying at anchor in the harbor. This shuttling was a necessary expedient because of the huge amount of men and equipment that had to be loaded in a 4-day period and the limited dock facilities available in the ports of southeast England. But every factor in this vast transportation problem had been envisaged and worked out in advance. The arithmetic of logistics, however, could not have clicked without the spirit of frictionless teamwork which prevailed among the staffs and men of the Army and Navy. The job was everybody's job. Army, Navy, Air Force. As each ship was completely loaded with its men and equipment, it pulled out into the harbor to take its place in the forming convoy. Aboard ship, the men sweated out the hours of waiting, each in his own way. Naval gun crews received individual briefings. The success of this tremendous undertaking depended vitally upon the naval bombardment that would precede the assault of ground forces. Troop units rehearsed their objectives from D-Day to D+3. Everything known about the enemy's defenses was thoroughly analyzed by officers and men. Preventive maintenance service of arms and equipment was highly stressed in all branches of our military forces. An important problem was how to prevent guns and equipment from becoming fouled by salt water and sand.